web chart. We are passing through difficult times, are not just in the sense of the spread of this pandemic, but also the effects that it is bound to leave on countries in terms of economic impact, political impact, and geostrategic impact. There are bound to be different types of fallout. One of them would be economic fallout. Every country will face it. We are also bracing up to face a major economic fallout from this pandemic. We seem to be relatively less impacted by economic fallout. These days, we only should talk in terms of comparisons, relative terms only, because there is no single country in the world which is not going to be impacted in one way or the other by this pandemic and its after effects. But relatively speaking, we probably will be less affected economically also. That gives a hope that probably we will do a turnaround in less time compared to many other developed and developing countries in the world. But I don't want to dwell at length on the domestic consequences. I would rather focus on the topic given to me today, that is about what will be the new world that would be emerging post the pandemic. The first question is whether there will be a new world order or not. Actually speaking, the setting for the rise of a new world order has already happened with the advent of this new century. Dramatic changes have started taking place. I also have written about it, so are many others. One of the major shifts that has taken place in the last about 2 decades was the shift of the global power axis. In the last century, it was the Western European nations and America which had been the epicenter of global power. The power axis was located somewhere in the Pacific Atlantic region. But in the 21st century, the rise of so-called Asian tigers towards the end of last century, and the quick rise of countries like India, China, and some of the other countries in our neighborhood has certainly moved the power axis to what is today very frequently referred to as the Indo-Pacific region. I would like to underscore one point here. When I talk about the Indo-Pacific region, or for that matter, when anybody in the strategic community talks about the Indo-Pacific region, some people suddenly start thinking that we are creating a new alliance, new global alliance in the name of Indo-Pacific region. Far from it. Indo-Pacific region is a natural region. In fact, I would say the Asia-Pacific was an artificial construct. Asia-Pacific was a construct by the Western powers, especially the Americans, to find a good foothold in the newly developing Asian region. But the Indo-Pacific, like if tomorrow somebody talks about Eurasia, Indo-Pacific, these are all natural regions. They exist. It's only that in the 21st century, these regions have become more powerful, more predominant, because the countries in the regions have emerged stronger than before. It is in that sense that I'm talking about the power axis shifting to the Indo-Pacific region in our neighborhood. So this major shift has already started happening. The importance of Indo-Pacific region has been recognized by many powerful countries in the world. Many have seen it as a region of opportunity. Some have still had suspicions about it. For example, our friends in Russia have not very easily, they were not very easily willing to accept this new proposition about Indo-Pacific region. For them, it looked like another geostrategic move by certain countries. But largely, the world has come to acknowledge the fact that the most happening region in the 21st century is going to be the Indo-Pacific region. It is around that time when the new global power equations are being formed that we have come face to face with this pandemic. If at all this pandemic is going to precipitate that process of shifting the power axis to our east. You have already seen the countries in the West, including the most powerful countries like America, countries in Europe, having faced this pandemic in a big way, having suffered in a big way, are looking at a long-term negative economic consequence of it. The negative economic consequence is likely to push these countries in two directions. One direction will be internal. They will turn more inwards. We all know about the America First campaign of President Trump. If he returns when the elections happen towards the end of this year, he is bound to take that idea of his America forward. So some countries are likely to turn more inwards. But then there are huge possibilities of other countries turning to new power players. China in our neighborhood has certainly emerged as a strong economic power. Its economic dominance will continue to remain in the years and decades to come. Although it will also suffer economically because of this virus and all. There is a projection that they will have a negative GDP growth rate of 6 to 7%. But we all know, there are many experts here, that China is a different country, a different economy, a different model. They know how to get out of these situations in their own way, which probably cannot be imitated or applied to countries like India. So, in spite of certain negative impact on its economy, it will try to re-emerge as a strong economic force. So naturally, there will be countries which would try to gravitate towards China for their own economic survival, economic revival, or economic future. See, the two types of movement is bound to happen. The pandemic has created one more peculiar situation in the world. In fact, I have written about it. The entire world was completely shaken up by this pandemic. What is that aspect which has shaken us up all? Is it that tiny virion whose size was supposed to be 1,000th of an eyelash? I think no. It's actually the story of two countries. The so-called most powerful country, the way that country has behaved, namely America, uh, portrayed a picture of helplessness, portrayed a picture of suffocation, suffering, rather than a picture of a powerful country standing up to help many countries in the world. That has certainly sent a message. But the other message also came from the behavior of the other big country in the world, namely China. The secretive nature of its handling of the virus, the hush-hush manner in which they tried to push it under the carpet in the first couple of months. Subsequently, the allegation is that they allowed the virus to escape from their borders, enter the world outside, and create havoc. And the way certain institutions have become sort of HMV of China have also created a huge psychological, moral impact on the countries in the world. So a situation where the most powerful country has lost, people have lost confidence or faith in it. The newly powerful country, people have lost faith in it, trust in it. A scenario of vacuum, a leadership vacuum, is also quite discernible at this point in time in the world today. So while countries remain powerful, remain there as active players, the new situation is likely to create new kind of global equations, global alliances, and global order. Let me just take up 2-3 points and close. We, from India's point of view, what do we do in that kind of a scenario? For us, there are a few challenges. When Prime Minister Modi took over in 2014, while at one level, foreign policy is a continuum. We continued the policies of our previous governments. But at another level, every government adds its own nuances, its own flavor to it. We have added a few elements to our foreign policy. The challenge for us now is what will happen to that. Generally speaking, India has always adopted a policy called strategic autonomy. In a new changing post-COVID world order, where does your strategic autonomy stand? Now, here we have to understand one thing. Strategic autonomy does not or should not be equated with what we used to do during the non-alignment days. Strategic autonomy means, of course, you are not going to be a member of any club, that is understood. But strategic autonomy is different from strategic neutrality. Strategic autonomy means in the newly emerging order, you will choose different partners for your different needs. That is strategic autonomy. If anybody thinks today that Prime Minister Modi is seen moving closer to America, is giving up on our strategic autonomy, that's a mistaken understanding. We have followed what we call as a de-hyphenated foreign policy. It's an extension of our strategic formula. In dehyphenation, we have good relations with a given country without that relationship impacting in any way any third country. That is what is called dehyphenation. We have had good relations with America. We still have good relations, try to maintain good relations with China also. And in the emerging new order, this rift between the two countries, especially if Trump returns in America, there is the whole assessment that this relationship will go under further strain, further stress. But in such a scenario, for India to continue with its strategic autonomy means having good relations with all the different power players in the world. So we have to be prepared for that kind of a new model of strategic autonomy, where we keep our dehyphenation formula intact and maintain our relations with all different countries. People today talk about the new Cold War. We have seen one Cold War in 50s and 60s and 70s up to the collapse of Soviet Union in early 90s. During that period, we used to talk about non-alignment. We were not playing either side outwardly, but both sides used to think that we are playing with the others. We are on the other side. But today's dehyphenation, today's strategic economy is slightly different. Secondly, the other challenge to our concept of neighborhood first. We have talked about taking all our neighbors along with us. Irrespective of this pandemic, that effort of ours has been constantly coming under pressure because of an inherent competition between us and China. In a new world order, that competition is going to grow further. So we need to be prepared for a greater competition. I'm not at all talking about any conflict or any struggle or war. I'm only talking in terms of greater competition in the immediate neighborhood, whether it is SAARC or it is BIMSTEC. The competition for sphere of influence is bound to be growing in the post-pandemic world. So India has to turn its attention to its neighborhood in a big way. Prime Minister has initiated some process during the pandemic. We have had we have created a SAARC fund, etc., etc. But I believe that we need to put greater energies into it. Naturally, as I mentioned in the beginning itself, we have the Indian Ocean and Indo-Pacific emerging as the most happening region. That process will definitely continue and it will further increase. In that, our Quad, our relations with ASEAN neighborhood, all of them are going to become very important for us. Now, during the pandemic crisis, we have faced some problem in our relations with the Gulf countries. A very temporary issue seems to have cropped up. Certain domestic happenings, or probably the perception about certain domestic happenings, has led to some tensions with us, some tensions in the Middle Eastern countries. But let me tell you, looking at it from the long-term foreign policy perspective, this is my view. I'm not representing government here. I'm just giving it as a person who is following these things closely. I have written about it. Trying to teach secularism to India is like carrying coals to Newcastle. Yet we are listening. The reason is there is an element of interdependence between us and a number of Middle Eastern countries. That the future is not likely to be like that. Once the energy options change, things will change. And today, those individuals, I'm not talking about any leaders, because no country head or no responsible country leader has talked anything about Islamophobia, etc. But people from the media, the so-called princesses, intellectuals who are talking about Islamophobia in the countries, look at the situation in those very countries. What are they? Do they represent real liberal democratic idea of a state? So this is a big issue that probably we have to raise at some point. In India, it's a country with 1.3 billion people. It belongs to every Indian. Every Indian is safe here. It's a big country. There can be some element on any side, on either side, who would be probably indulging in things that are not acceptable in any civilized society. But then it cannot be used as a stick to beat with. One final point I touch upon, that is with respect to China. India and China have had a history of relationship in the last several decades. In the last 5-6 years, Modi's government has tried to maintain utmost cordiality with China. While doing that, we followed the principle of strong ground posturing, or probably I will put it the other way, proactive diplomacy together with strong ground posturing. We have engaged in proactive diplomacy, but we have not yielded on the ground. So this has taken the relationship to a different level. We would like this relationship to continue as an even kind of relationship. We have an interest in our Indo-Pacific region, where China is also a big power. We have always talked about free, open, secure, and prosperous Indian Ocean. We also, our Prime Minister also highlighted the fact that when we talk about free, open, secure, etc., we are not excluding any country. It is going to be inclusive. When we say inclusive, that means even China has a role to play in that. So in this inclusive kind of arrangement, we need a role for China also. But in that, we earnestly hope that China, post the pandemic, will affect certain changes in its approach to global issues. In the Chinese Communist Party of China, CPC terminology, there is a phrase called line struggle. Line struggle normally means that every 4 years when the party Congress meets, certain leaders are pushed out. There's a struggle for hierarchy in the party. Somebody will rise and somebody will be pushed out. With every emergence of every new leader, some kind of a line struggle takes place. So it is an integral part of their CPC, ideology. It happened with the rise of President Xi Jinping in 2013 also. Certain important leaders have been sidelined and a new group of leaders have emerged. But line struggle also occasionally meant in China a change of the party line with respect to many issues. It happened with the rise of Deng Xiaoping. The focus of Mao had all along been on security, all along been internal. A shift happened at the time of Deng Xiaoping from security to economic prosperity. So much so that the phrase that was coined was GDPism. So the principle for China would be GDPism. GDPism means economic prosperity. With the advent of Xi in 2013, this party line has again changed to use the economic prosperity to spread its influence over large parts of the world, create a number of countries that are dependent on China. We have seen Belt and Road Initiative. These are line changes that have happened in terms of their policies also. Maybe we hope that another line struggle and change of line will happen in China. It becomes a more open society, more democratic. So that will certainly help in building a different kind of world order, world arrangement post the COVID. Having said it, let me conclude by saying that in the new emerging world order post the COVID, it's going to be a new agenda that will dominate the world powers. It's no longer going to be about security or about manufacturing industry, trade. In fact, country after country today is talking about self-reliance. That means there will be lessened reliance on other countries. Self-reliance in terms of economic life of the nations. The countries will turn inwards. But then the new agenda that is likely to dominate the global discourse is going to be issues like climate change, issues like environment. Countries have to cooperate with each other on these issues. Countries will be compelled to do that. Healthcare is going to be a major factor in global relationships post the COVID. Doctors, medical facilities, pharmaceutical industry, nurses, healthcare workers. It's going to be a global activity in the post-COVID world. And since we have started the new phenomena of social distancing, it is going to create to lead to emergence of newer technologies based on artificial intelligence. Role of humans, involvement of humans is bound to come down. Involvement of machines will rise. That is bound to give space for high-end technologies, frontier technologies like artificial intelligence. In all this, one common factor that will continue from the past to the present to future will be rule-based world order. I am deliberately not using the word liberal democracy, illiberal democracy, etc., etc. It's going to be a new rule-based world order. So this is going to be the new agenda for the post-COVID world. In that, I believe that given the constraints that I discussed, or given the priorities that I discussed for our country, for India, and as in the very beginning I mentioned, on the hope that we will be able to do an early turnaround in our economy. Without that, of course, all that I'm talking will be meaningless if we fail to revive our economy, domestic economy. So on the premise that early turnaround, maybe in a year's time, we will be able to come back with a good, as IMF has projected, 7+% GDP. If we are about to come back, then I'm sure on all other global agenda items, India has a very big role to play, whether it is climate change, environmental issues, or it is healthcare, or for that matter, artificial intelligence or high-end technologies, or for that matter, rule-based world order. In all these areas, it is India which will probably command the trust and confidence of the global powers because of its own behavior during the whole pandemic crisis and also before that. Uh, in that sense, India should brace up to play a proactive and bigger role in the post-COVID world. Less one caution and I end. It's not, I am not at all saying that India is going to be a superpower controlling or guiding or all that. Although it's everybody's wish that India should become Vishwaguru, etc. My wish also. But it will be a cooperative world. So countries in our neighborhood, whether it is South Korea or it is Vietnam or it is Singapore, the democracies which have shown glorious example of tackling this crisis, are countries like America, countries like Germany. We all have to come together to build a new world order based on this new agenda, the 4 or 5 points that I have highlighted. That is, I believe, going to be the future of the world. That is going to be the new world order. I thank you all for your patient listening.